Berry, the executive director of the AFCA, located in Waco, but of course nationwide. Todd joins us as he has before on Sikkim 365 Radio and also YouTube's 365 Sports. Todd, thank you very much. I know your schedule's got to be completely crazy busy. I just saw where Petrino at Idaho, he's out. What are your thoughts, and what is the thought, and what are you guys discussing about so many coaching changes happening so early in the year now?
Yeah, and good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. There's certainly, I actually did an interview yesterday with another industry on this subject matter, and yeah, certainly we've never seen this many at this point in time. I know that many of the athletic directors have suggested that they want to do this so that they can get ahead on the coaching search, and yet we've got not very many that are very far along on their coaching search. And if they're actually trying to assist the coaching search, you think they'd be further along than where they're at. And obviously they're doing this for recruiting purposes. But yeah, it's a question. I think there's a few things that are probably going to come out of it. One is the fact that I talked with conference commissioners today about potentially looking at the early signing date, about some of the impacts of the early signing date. I think it's been very good for the student athletes. I think it's been good for our coaches. I think it's provided some clarity and transparency to the process. But maybe that date's a little bit early, and if we push that date back, maybe that if some of these accusations are true, maybe that would allow our coaches to try to be able to finish up the season. And then the other thing, obviously, I think is we're in a new world right now in terms of the name, image, and likeness, and all the one-time transfer and the transfer portal. And so this could be a byproduct of that. And that's, difficult assessment, I think, for any athletic director to make in relation to how many players are going to transfer out of the program at the end of the season. And so maybe they're trying to get ahead on that. And so we probably need to address that matter also.
That was going to be my next question, Coach, in that how do you – again, if you push signing day back, that's one thing, but the one-time transfer – that can be kind of a fluid thing of guys leaving the program throughout the year. So that's almost like a moving target you guys would almost never really be able to hit, would you?
It'd be difficult. One of the things that we've argued for as coaches is, let's create some windows. If a young person's unhappy and wants to leave, or they want to, one of the things the coaches are obviously concerned about is that there's no player on your team is safe now with the name, image, and likeness, because it's too easy to go out and buy a player. And so consequently, we're probably going to see an uptick in the number of transfers. But if there were some windows to suggest that, it's during this time frame that players could enter the portal, they've made their decision. They might have made it earlier, but this is the first time that the portal opens. That might provide a little bit more clarity, I think, for everyone in the process, and force some decisions to be in that moment, to where coaches and teams sometimes forget the players that are left on a team, and how a transfer can really impact them because it's outside of the signing dates, and so then you're not able to replace that player, and especially if you've already hit your 25 limit in relation to the FBS number anyway, in terms of the number of scholarships that you can give out in any given year.
Todd, you've run a program as a head coach, and you saw a couple of weeks ago Joey McGuire and the story about him moving to get the head coaching job at Tech because they had lost Matt Wells, or he had fired Matt Wells, Texas Tech had. What's the precedent there about in season an actual assistant coach taking over at another program in which you're going to play in 2 or 3 weeks? And what are your thoughts about that one?
Yeah, obviously that's difficult. Matt Wells was a very, very good friend of mine from Sallisaw, Oklahoma. Known him for a long time. And Joey McGuire is a wonderful hire there at Texas Tech. And I've known Joey for, probably 15, 20 years now. And, just a great coach. I know he'll do a great job. But these are obviously difficult in season. I hate that it happens. But in the same sense, too, Kirby Holcutt, the athletic director there at Texas Tech, he did kind of what I said at the opening of this call is, he let a coach go, but then he hired a coach so that they could get ahead on recruiting. And so he did follow through with his rationale for making that move, and I can't fault Kirby for that. I don't like these moves again mid-season, but in the same sense too, I kind of applaud Kirby for at least not using an excuse of recruiting.
Now, I get the impression that Joey wants to be as far away from Waco as possible, not this weekend, but next when they play Baylor. I really do. And I'll continue to stay in touch with him because I've known him. But what would your thoughts be if all of a sudden he showed up on the sidelines with headsets?
Well, I don't suspect that that's going to happen.
No, I don't either. I don't either.
So I hate to. Joey is just a tremendous person. He wants to always do the right thing, and I know, and so consequently, I'm not too worried about that.
What about when you do move mid-season and you do have then the recruiting because you want to get a jump on it? The thoughts of what it's like to start cherry-picking commitments that you help commit to other schools?
Well, that's always been a question forever. That's partially one of the reasons why, coaches at one point in time were hired for some of those connections. That's against our code of ethics as coaches. Traditionally in the past, when those things have arose, then they would have to appear before our ethics committee annually. And the reasons why that actually ended up happening. But now, obviously, we have the NCAA has put together in the last couple of years the IAWP legislation, which is the individual associated with the prospect. And so, if a coach does have a association and goes to another institution, then it limits some of those capabilities for those individuals to be contacted. Obviously, if the young person is interested in another school, then they need to be contacting some other person rather than the individual that they had that association with at the prior university.
I don't think most people would know that, Coach, that rule exists. That's pretty interesting because most people automatically think, okay, our coach is going to this school. He's going to take 9 of our recruits automatically because they love that guy and not us. So it's good to hear those kind of things that you guys do, and you have an ethics process involved. I think a lot of people just don't know that about your organization and what you do.
Yeah, that's something that's been longstanding, probably 5 decades worth. I think it was founded about 50 years ago. The ethics committee was, and we push hard with our coaches in relation to understanding those rules and the ethics that kind of revolve around some of this. And obviously, we received some help from the NCAA a couple of years ago with the IAWP legislation because that further penalized both the coach and the student athlete. Now, again, we're not trying to keep the student athlete from making good decisions. They just don't need to be connected with that coach. They need to be connected with another coach.
Todd Berry, the executive director of the AFCA, American Football Coaches Association, with us on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Todd, it sure seems like there's just so many different issues floating out there. Are you busier now in terms of dealing with various issues than ever before, or is it really the same and it just seems like maybe to the outside that you're dealing with more than ever?
No, I think you're completely right. I was talking with an FBS commissioner today about that very issue that I'd never in our time frame have we ever seen the number of, I think, really, really critical decisions that need to be made in the next few years and how fluid the situation is right now. From us just coming out of a very, very difficult year with COVID, and many of the questions that revolved around the NCAA leadership at that point in time, and now you have the NCAA going through a governance question about what is their mandate, what should they do, what do the universities want them to do, and in the backdrop of all that is the Supreme Court ruling, which went against the NCAA 9-0. It basically told the NCAA you probably shouldn't be involved in an awful lot of these things, and so that gets down to, is the NCAA the right organization for the whole membership or maybe just partial parts of the membership? We certainly have these players transferring all over the place. And I know that, people are throwing out stats right now. And but the problem with all that is that the NIL deals were not until this summer. Mm-hmm. And so nobody had the opportunity to go out and recruit with NIL opportunities. I had a coach here the other day that's got a tremendous quarterback, a young quarterback, very happy in his program. He called me and he had a question, want to know what an answer was. He's got this young person has done so well this year. He already has an NIL deal, but now the corporate entity that's sponsoring him in his NIL now wants him to move to a bigger marketplace. And these are all things that the coaches felt like these were the things that needed to be addressed on the front end of this, and nobody kind of wanted to talk about it. But these are things we knew that were going to happen. I had another coach here about a month ago call me, and he's got a rogue booster who's going out and promising all these young people NIL deals. And these are young people that basically the coach doesn't even feel like can play at his level, nor are they ones that necessarily wants because they don't fit in the system. And he was told by his athletic director president to leave it alone because this booster is important to the program. These are all things that went on during the 70s before all of these rules kind of went into effect and why the rules were in place. And now we have basically boosters out there buying football teams, and maybe sometimes the ones that not even the coaches want.
That's crazy. That is insane.
Wow.
Man,
that is insane.
You are right smack in the middle of the state of Texas where you're building, but I know you represent the country, the American Football Coaches Association. But you're also in the territory of the Texas High School Coaches Association. What are your thoughts about a high school player now leaving early, even if he does graduate or whatever? Was that something that was brought up much with the Quinn Ewers story to Ohio State and giving up his senior year of high school?
Yeah, Joe Martin does a wonderful job there with the Texas High School Coaches Association. Very dear friend. We talk often about some of these issues. We do deal with our high school coaches. We have a number of them, especially here in Texas, that are a part of our association. I try to represent them in relation to the NCAA interests when I'm in Indianapolis. This is going to be one of these things that is part of the NIL conversation that I think, again, as coaches, we worried about. We mentioned 3 years ago to all the people that were trying to get NIL passed that be prepared for some of these outcomes. And there was no question that it was going to float down to the high schools and in these scenarios. And quite honestly, while we'd all like to do something about it, the courts have pretty much ruled on this. And so this is the world that we're in. It might kind of get sleazy and disgusting at times, but that's kind of what everybody decided at that point in time. That's what the courts ruled upon. And so consequently, this is what we get out of it. And it's discouraging. You'd like to see those young people finish. Now, I do think that another thing that's coming out right now that we're seeing is certainly if you're a collegiate coach and I go out and sign a high school player and he becomes a great player, well, then he's at risk of transferring. And so that then suggests that maybe a transfer that's a young transfer might be a better option for me, because if they transfer in, then I have a chance to develop them because they can't leave because they've already transferred once. They could still leave, but would have to set a year. And so consequently, that I think further elevates the desire to get into the transfer portal. One of the, I am talking about the coaches recruiting the transfer portal. Why take a high school player that's unproven when I'm going to get a collegiate player that's more proven and will stay with me? And that's something that we don't want. We love our scholastic recruiting model as coaches. We're the last one out there. Every other sport recruits off of AAU teams and club teams and so on. But, we want our high school coaches involved. And one of the things that our high school coaches have done in response to this, in order to make their players more marketable, is they're having them graduate early, which I hate, but I also understand. They're basically saying, hey, graduate in December, and then that way at least you could be competitive with a potential transfer player, because you'll at least be there in the spring too. And so when they're recruiting, or probably when they're competing for that one scholarship, they need to have all of the options and availabilities they can to be competitive against this new transfer market that we're looking at.
Well, there's a lot of basketball coaches that have kind of abandoned the scholastic model unless they're bowled over by someone. And yeah, I mean, Coach, I completely understand your concern in that if football coaches start going that way, that's going to be kind of troubling.
Well, yeah, I hate sometimes whenever we've tried to stay away from the basketball model. I'm not apologetic about saying that, because we've been very, very, we have suggested all along that we love our scholastic model. We believe that college is about academics, and this is not about very few are going to have a chance to go on to professional football. We hope they all have a chance, but the reality of it is that is not going to happen. Only 2% are actually going to have an opportunity to do it, and then they only last an average of 2.7 years in the league. That's not a career. That's a good time. And so there has to be something more out of this that they get. And as coaches, we believed in that, and we believe in the academic model. But quite honestly, with NIL, I think, and with the transfer, because those two together are the real problem, because now everybody on your team is basically in the portal at the end of this next spring. And why would they not be? Because they can either stay at the place that they're at, or they can explore their NIL opportunities and see if they can make more money at another institution. And so this next August, I fear that many of our coaches are going to be sitting around going, man, I just lost 5 offensive linemen and I don't have anybody to replace them. And I can't even hardly practice now because I've already used my scholarships on other positions back in February. Thus, again, the window that needs to happen between when players can decide they want to leave a program. When should they have that opportunity to have the free year or the free waiver in relation to their upcoming eligibility?
I'm with you, because like all of a sudden you're in spring ball and your quarterback just decides like, all right, I'm out of here. I mean, I'm going to go to USC or something. I think a window makes a lot of sense. Todd, I know.
Then the other thing on top of that, real quickly, is you lose your starting quarterback. Now your opponents are all looking at that second team quarterback going, you know what, that guy's got significant value to me now. Not in necessarily that I feel like that he can play for me, but I don't want to play against him. And if I can take him, then all of a sudden my opponent now is down to their third team quarterback.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that window definitely makes a lot of sense. Todd, I know that about a month ago you were quoted and talking about flopping in college football and looking at the ways that maybe that could be curtailed a little bit. What's that discussion been like? And also, are there any other rules out there that are kind of in the target of your institution's focus right now?
Well, the feigning injuries is still a problem. And what we wanted to see last year and what we asked the NCAA to do was to do something about it. Obviously, they're the rulemaking process, and this was unanimous amongst our coaches that this was a problem. I think any kind of in-game suspensions are going to be problematic, because we certainly don't want a player getting up to make sure that he doesn't cost his team a timeout or something like that when he's injured. And we certainly don't want the officials making a decision about whether a player's injured or not injured. And I think the appropriate way to do it was kind of what we ended up with, is for the universities to go back and review that film with the conference office, and let the conference offices then decide, you know, hey, how long was the player out for? This looks suspicious. I was at a game recently where all of a sudden 2 players just fell down at the exact same time. And it was whenever the other team was trying to snap the football, and they were, you know, neither one of them were in the previous play, involved in the previous play. And those are the kind of things, that's not what we want. That's certainly not what, that our coaching community wants. It's bad for the game. And so we need to do something about it. But to me, that's the way to do it, is to punish after the fact. And, you know, what our coaches have suggested in those kind of situations is that coach that's responsible should be banned from the next game, and those players should be banned from the next game. These are egregious in our opinion, and the only way to handle them is to get very punitive with what happens. I think the other thing that's out there that I think it's time to review a little bit. Our coaches appreciate the targeting rule. It has changed the game. It's been a good rule. Our coaches are still supportive of targeting. But in the same sense, too, we're at that point, I think, where we're at critical mass. The numbers really haven't changed over the last 3 years because the behaviors have changed. You know, we've only got 6 players in FBS football that have 2 targeting penalties this year.
What?
Only 6.
Really?
Yes, only 6 have got 2 targeting penalties during the course of the year. We have none that have more than that. In FCS football, which has about the same number of players, there's only 5 that have 2. That's as of this week. And so consequently, you have to look at some of these things and say, these are really, if something's malicious, a player launches, he hits a defenseless player, then our coaches have all been in support of, yes, let's get rid of them. Matter of fact, we're the ones that suggested when a player has 3 during a year, then he needs to miss another game. That came from the coaches. And so we are in support of this rule, but we do think at this point in time, any of these, we appreciate probably more than any, because we played the game and we coached the game for so many years, how fast all of this happens. And this is a very, very significant penalty to miss part of that game and potentially part of the next, or maybe or if it's in the third case, another game. And so these are really significant penalties. And so consequently, we just think that this needs to be looked at. We've suggested targeting 1 and targeting 2 to like basketball, to where, the ones that aren't egregious, that aren't malicious, then those become a 15-yard penalty, and the player is allowed to stay in the game. But we still, if there's helmet contact, then we still want the 15-yard penalty, just like a face mask. Now, I don't know where that's going to go. I've been working on this for a while, and I think that probably the better compromise right now, it appears, based off the people that I have talked with about this, which are basically commissioners and football oversight and so on, is to maybe suggest that, targeting becomes one of those things on the first one that you have during the year that you miss maybe that quarter and the next quarter. And then you're back in for that second half or the first half of the next game. But these are really significant penalties. I think it's very, very frustrating. I still don't know that anybody can tell you what targeting actually is. And we've been going after this for a number of years now. And at some point in time, I think you have to kind of take a step back and maybe suggest that we need to take a hard look at what this penalty is and the consequences of this penalty if we still can't decide what the penalty actually is.
Todd, I know you've given us more time than I asked, but you coached in Louisiana, obviously at UL Monroe, and I think you went against Baylor back when they were making that climb up the ladder. But how much, and did you ever go against Ron Roberts and or when Dave Aranda was in assistant coach when he was in, I think, Delta State or whatever it was? How often did you get to run into them?
I didn't ever go up against Ron, but I did go up against Dave. Yeah, he's absolutely really good. They are such a fun team to watch. They play the game the right way. They're just they're fast, they're physical. You can tell they just enjoy really playing the game together. And so it's a joy to watch them. Dave's just Coach Aranda's a wonderful man, and you want to see those wonderful people in our profession succeed, and certainly he's done that. And they're exciting to watch, and he's obviously very, very good. Baylor's good on both sides of the football, and that makes them a very, very dangerous football team, especially when we look at the national landscape to where, some programs are really good on offense, but maybe not good on defense or vice versa. I think Baylor's a very, very well-rounded team. Maybe when you look at the balance of those top group, maybe the ones that is the most balanced out of all of them.
Todd, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it so much on your plate. Good luck with all that, and you're doing a great job. Todd Berry, American Football Coaches Association Executive Director, with us on 365 Sports and Sikkim 365 Radio. Coming up next, Jennifer